The office was buzzing with excitement, the kind of excitement that made every step echo against the polished marble floors and every whisper seem amplified. Employees moved quickly, some carrying tablets, others juggling papers, but all of them wore a mixture of nervousness and pride. Today was the day the company would unveil its newest product, a device that promised to change the way people interacted with technology. Everyone in the room could feel the weight of the moment, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. In the corner, a young woman stood quietly, observing everything with a calm and measured gaze. She had been at the company for only a few months, but her keen attention to detail and strong sense of ethics had already made her stand out. Unlike the others, she didn't move with nervous energy. She moved with purpose. She watched the team gather around the large presentation table, their faces lit up with excitement and a hint of anxiousness. The CEO was already at the front, ready to present, his signature smile plastered across his face, confident and commanding. The young woman had heard stories about him. He was known for his charm, his ability to sell an idea with nothing more than a few words and a smile. Many respected him deeply, and some even feared contradicting him. Yet as she looked at him now, she felt a mixture of curiosity and wariness. There was an undeniable energy about him, a force that made people believe in his vision almost instantly, but something in her gut told her that not everything would be as perfect as it seemed today. The room quieted as the CEO began to speak. His voice was smooth and confident, drawing everyone's attention immediately. He started with the usual formalities, praising the team for their hard work and dedication. Then, with a dramatic flourish, he unveiled the product. It sat on the table, sleek and polished, glinting under the bright lights of the room. Gasps of admiration swept across the faces of the employees. Many reached for their phones to take pictures or notes. The atmosphere was electric. The young woman leaned in slightly, her eyes scanning every detail of the device. It was indeed beautiful, and she could see why everyone was so impressed. But as she looked closer, her eyes narrowed. Something felt off. There was a small but noticeable flaw, something that could easily be missed by someone not paying close attention. A part of the mechanism seemed too delicate, almost fragile, and a specific feature could potentially mislead users or cause unintended problems. She couldn't ignore it. Her mind raced as she thought about the consequences if this flaw went unnoticed and the product was launched. She knew speaking up in this room would be difficult. Everyone was enamored by the CEO's presentation, hanging on his every word. Interrupting him could be seen as rude or presumptuous. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that staying silent could lead to a bigger problem. She took a deep breath, steadying her thoughts. She reminded herself that her responsibility wasn't just to follow along, but to ensure that the product they were so proud of was truly ready for the world. As the CEO continued, he demonstrated the features of the device with practiced ease. He clicked buttons, swiped screens, and spoke passionately about the user experience. The room responded with applause and nods, clearly impressed by the smooth operation and elegant design. Colleagues whispered to each other, praising the innovation and brilliance of the product. The young woman listened, but her focus was entirely on the details that others overlooked. She tested each function mentally, imagining real-world scenarios and how the device would respond. The flaw she noticed seemed minor at first glance, but in practical use it could be significant. Time seemed to slow for her as she weighed her options. Should she speak up now in front of everyone? Or should she wait until later and approach the CEO privately? She could feel the tension building in her chest, the familiar mix of anxiety and determination. She had always been someone who valued honesty and integrity, even when it was uncomfortable. This was one of those moments. The thought of someone using the product and encountering a problem because she stayed silent was unacceptable. Meanwhile, the CEO's voice carried on, filling the room with enthusiasm. He spoke about future possibilities, the potential market impact, and the company's growth. The young woman noticed the subtle cues from the audience. Some were nodding in agreement, others were smiling, completely captivated by his confidence. She understood why people were drawn to him, but she also knew that charisma alone didn't guarantee safety or quality. She felt a surge of responsibility. If no one else noticed the flaw, she had to be the one to point it out. She shifted slightly, preparing herself mentally. She observed the reactions of her colleagues. A few of them caught her eye, offering small smiles or subtle nods, sensing her determination. She didn't need encouragement, but it was comforting to see that she wasn't entirely alone in her awareness. The CEO, oblivious to her internal debate, continued to present, completely confident in the perfection of his creation. His gestures were smooth, his words polished, and his smile unwavering. But that smile, brilliant as it was, didn't reach his eyes in the way that genuine reassurance might. It was a performance, and the young woman saw right through it. The moment grew heavier with anticipation. Every second that passed felt like a small eternity. The room was filled with admiration. But for her, it was filled with questions and possibilities. What if she was wrong? What if she misjudged the flaw? Her mind raced through every detail, every scenario she could think of. She considered the potential backlash, the embarrassment, the possibility of being dismissed. But then she reminded herself of the larger picture, the people who would use this product, the trust they placed in the company, and the integrity she owed to both. Finally, the CEO paused, turning the device in his hands and looking around the room, expecting approval, expecting praise. That was the moment she decided. Her voice would break the silence. She would speak up, even if it meant shaking the foundations of this carefully controlled environment. She straightened her posture, took another deep breath, and prepared to say the words that had been forming in her mind for minutes. The energy in the room was palpable, and though no one knew it yet, everything was about to change. The young woman's eyes never left the device. Her hands rested lightly on the table, steady and poised. She could feel her heartbeat, steady yet intense, a rhythm that matched the tension in the room. The CEO's attention shifted slightly, sensing the movement, but he didn't expect what was coming. In that moment, she realized that courage wasn't about loud proclamations or dramatic gestures. It was about honesty, about speaking the truth when it mattered most, no matter the audience or the stakes. Her mind focused on the words she would use, simple yet direct, clear enough to make the point without unnecessary confrontation. She reminded herself that the goal wasn't to challenge the CEO's authority, but to prevent a potential problem that could affect countless users. Every instinct told her that this was the right choice. She could feel the weight of the decision, but also the clarity that came with knowing she was acting with integrity. As the CEO turned to gesture towards the screen behind him, she finally opened her mouth, her voice calm but firm, ready to cut through the room's collective awe. The words formed perfectly in her mind, ready to be spoken, carrying the gravity of her observation and the certainty of her responsibility. Every eye in the room was about to shift, every expectation about to be challenged, and she knew that the next few moments would be remembered by everyone present. The young woman was ready, and she knew that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, was worth speaking. The room remained silent for a moment after her words. Everyone turned their heads, some in surprise, some in disbelief. The CEO, who had been smiling confidently just seconds ago, froze. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the smile that had seemed so permanent wavered. The young woman felt the weight of the room on her shoulders, but she stayed calm, steadying herself as she prepared to explain. She gestured lightly toward the device, pointing out the part that had caught her attention. Her voice was clear, measured, not loud, but strong enough to be heard across the room. She explained why the feature could be problematic, describing scenarios where users might misunderstand it, or the mechanism could fail. She spoke without anger, without accusation, only stating the facts and the potential outcomes. She wanted everyone to understand that her concern came from responsibility, not from a desire to criticize. The CEO blinked, his mind racing. He had not expected anyone to question the product in front of the entire team. Most people had been too impressed by his presentation to notice flaws. Some employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to react. A few exchanged quick glances, silently acknowledging that she might be right. The tension in the room was thick, almost tangible, as the young woman continued to outline her observations, step by step. Her reasoning was precise, logical, and thorough. She described how the feature could fail under certain conditions, the risks it posed to users, and the possible consequences for the company's reputation. She didn't accuse anyone or point fingers. She simply presented the facts. Her confidence was quiet but undeniable, and the clarity of her words began to pierce the initial shock and disbelief in the room. Employees who had initially been unsure now leaned forward, listening closely. Some whispered to each other, quietly agreeing with her points. The CEO finally spoke, his voice controlled but edged with tension. He asked questions, trying to clarify her observations, challenging some points while acknowledging others. He was trying to protect his reputation, his authority, and the work of his team, but the young woman answered with patience. She explained her reasoning again, breaking it down in simple terms, and provided hypothetical examples to show exactly what could go wrong. Her attention to detail impressed some of the employees who had doubted her at first. They began to see the validity of her argument, realizing that the potential risks were real and needed attention. A few senior team members exchanged looks. They had been loyal supporters of the CEO, often nodding along and agreeing with his every suggestion. Yet now they saw something they had overlooked. They began to understand that the young woman's concern was legitimate, and not just an attempt to challenge authority. Her words had a weight that could not be ignored, and the room's energy shifted subtly. The focus was no longer just on the CEO's presentation, but on the potential flaw she had identified. The young woman noticed the change. She didn't allow herself to feel triumphant. She stayed focused on ensuring that the message was understood. She continued to walk the team through the specifics, pointing out exactly where the issue could occur and why it might not be obvious at first glance. She spoke in simple, direct terms that everyone could follow. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the initial tension, providing clarity in a situation that could have quickly become chaotic. Some of the employees began to ask questions. They wanted to understand the problem better, to visualize the scenarios she described. She answered each question thoughtfully, never becoming defensive or dismissive. Her honesty and clarity began to win over more of the room. People who had initially been skeptical were now nodding quietly, recognizing the importance of addressing the issue before moving forward with the launch. The CEO's expression shifted again. He was no longer just surprised. He was thoughtful, almost introspective. He realized that her observations were valid, and that ignoring them could lead to serious problems. The young woman saw the subtle change in his demeanor and continued calmly. She didn't gloat or try to prove herself. She simply stated what needed to be done. Her focus was on the integrity of the product and the trust of the users, not on any personal recognition. As the discussion continued, a few employees who had been quiet began to speak up, supporting her points or adding their own observations. The room started to feel collaborative instead of tense. The CEO, though still cautious, began to listen more closely, asking for clarification rather than dismissing concerns outright. The young woman appreciated this approach, seeing it as a sign that her courage and honesty were making an impact. She explained the potential risks in practical terms, suggesting ways to test the product further before release, rather than simply pointing out flaws without solutions. Her recommendations were straightforward, focused on realistic actions the team could take to ensure the product's success. She suggested testing scenarios, adjustments to the mechanism, and ways to communicate clearly with users about the feature. The CEO, though initially defensive, started to see the wisdom in these suggestions. The employees in the room, many of whom had been unsure or hesitant at first, began to contribute their own ideas, building on the foundation she had laid. What had started as a moment of tension was turning into a productive discussion that could improve the product and prevent future issues. Throughout the conversation, she maintained her calm and professional demeanor. She understood that the stakes were high, but she also knew that careful observation, honesty, and persistence could create meaningful change. The CEO, who had once seemed untouchable in his confidence, now appeared open to guidance. He asked more questions, seeking to understand the specifics, and the young woman answered with clarity and patience. Her focus was not on confrontation, but on ensuring that the product was truly ready for the users it would serve. The energy in the room shifted from tension to collaboration. The employees, who had been caught between admiration for the CEO and uncertainty about the young woman's concerns, began to align themselves with the practical solutions being discussed. The young woman continued to provide guidance, carefully pointing out the areas that needed attention while encouraging constructive feedback. She emphasized the importance of quality and safety over appearances or speed, reminding the team that their work had a real impact on people's lives. By the time the initial discussion ended, the CEO's expression had changed completely. The confident, unshakable smile had returned, but it was tempered with respect and consideration. He acknowledged the young woman's observations and thanked her for speaking up. The employees around the room quietly recognized the significance of the moment. The young woman had not only identified a potential problem, but had done so with integrity and professionalism, earning the respect of both her peers and the CEO. As the meeting concluded, the team moved forward with a plan to test the product more thoroughly, implement adjustments, and ensure that the launch would be safe and reliable. The young woman left the room feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. She had faced a challenging situation, spoken up when it mattered, and helped guide the team toward a better outcome. The experience reinforced her belief in the importance of honesty, attention to detail, and courage, even in the face of authority. The office buzzed with renewed energy. Employees discussed the plan for additional testing, sharing ideas and observations. The young woman observed the conversations with interest, noting how collaboration had replaced tension. She realized that her decision to speak up had set a tone for the team, encouraging open communication and careful consideration. The CEO, now fully engaged in the problem-solving process, seemed genuinely appreciative of the insights provided, showing that even those in positions of power could learn and adapt. She returned to her desk with a sense of purpose. The experience had been intense, but it was also a reminder that one person's attention to detail and willingness to speak the truth could make a significant difference. She continued her work with focus and determination, ready to support the team in implementing the necessary changes. The day had started with excitement and anticipation, and it ended with a sense of achievement, integrity, and teamwork, laying the foundation for the product's ultimate success. The following morning, the office felt different. There was still the usual buzz of activity, the clicking of keyboards and low hum of conversations, but now there was an added layer of purpose and attention. Employees were no longer moving through their tasks on autopilot. They were thinking critically, double-checking and collaborating more carefully. The young woman arrived early, her mind already focused on the next steps for the product. The previous day's discussion had set a tone, and she felt a responsibility to help maintain it. She settled at her desk and began reviewing the notes she had taken during the meeting. Every detail mattered. She wanted to ensure that the potential problem was addressed thoroughly, and that no aspect was overlooked. She considered the various scenarios she had outlined the day before, thinking about how each adjustment could improve the product and protect the users. Her determination was quiet but firm. She knew that real change required careful, consistent effort. Soon the CEO appeared, walking briskly through the office. His expression was thoughtful, more serious than usual. He stopped briefly by her desk, giving her a small nod of acknowledgement. There was a subtle tension in his eyes, the kind that comes from someone realizing that leadership sometimes requires humility and listening. The young woman returned the nod, keeping her focus on the work at hand. She didn't seek praise, only the satisfaction of doing what was right. The CEO gathered the team for a follow-up meeting. This time, the atmosphere was less about presentation and more about collaboration. Everyone was aware that there was a problem to solve, and the energy was constructive. The young woman was at the center of the discussion again, not because she wanted attention, but because her insights were crucial. She explained in detail the specific flaw, breaking it down into manageable pieces so that the entire team could understand the implications. Her calm, clear communication helped ease any lingering tension. Team members asked questions, some challenging her perspective to better understand the risk, others seeking advice on how to adjust the design or feature. She responded patiently, walking through examples and suggesting solutions without being condescending. Her approach encouraged participation and built trust. The room, which had once been filled with awe and hesitation, now buzzed with problem-solving energy. It was a new dynamic, one where ideas were exchanged freely and every contribution was valued. The CEO listened more than he spoke. When he did contribute, it was to clarify goals or propose ways to implement changes. He had shifted from being the sole voice of authority to being a collaborator, seeking input and considering alternative approaches. The young woman noticed the subtle shift in his leadership style and felt a quiet sense of relief. Her courage to speak up had not only highlighted a problem, but also influenced the way the team functioned. The value of honesty and critical thinking was now clear to everyone. As the meeting progressed, they worked through potential solutions. Some involved minor adjustments to the mechanism, Others required careful testing of scenarios that had not been considered initially. The young woman took the lead in outlining a testing plan, suggesting step-by-step methods to evaluate each risk. She emphasized precision and patience, explaining that rushing could create further problems. Her calm authority inspired confidence in the team, and her focus on practical outcomes kept the discussion productive and grounded. A few employees, who had initially doubted her, now contributed their own insights. They suggested adjustments, tested hypothetical situations, and brainstormed ways to improve user experience. The young woman welcomed every idea, recognizing that collaboration often produces better results than individual effort alone. Her role was not to dominate but to guide, ensuring that the team remained focused on solutions rather than criticism. The atmosphere was one of shared responsibility and mutual respect. During the discussion, the CEO paused to reflect. He asked a question about a scenario she hadn't considered, and she responded thoughtfully, walking him through the reasoning and potential consequences. He listened intently, nodding occasionally. It was a moment of subtle transformation. The young woman realized that her presence and insight were not only influencing the product, but also shaping leadership behavior. She felt the weight of this realization but did not let it distract her. Her priority remained the integrity of the product and the welfare of those who would use it. By mid-morning, the team had outlined a detailed plan. They would conduct extensive tests, make necessary adjustments, and reconvene to review progress before moving forward with any public launch. The young woman felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that careful observation and honest communication had led to this outcome. Yet she remained humble, understanding that the process was ongoing and that diligence was required at every step. After the meeting, she returned to her desk to begin organizing the testing schedule. She communicated with team members individually, assigning responsibilities and ensuring that everyone understood the specific tasks. Her approach was methodical and clear. She checked in regularly, providing guidance without micromanaging. Her leadership was quiet but effective, creating an environment where accountability and attention to detail were valued. Throughout the day, she observed subtle changes in the office culture. Colleagues who had been hesitant to speak up were now more willing to share their observations and ideas. The CEO occasionally stopped by to ask questions or offer support, demonstrating a willingness to learn and adapt. The young woman noticed the growing confidence and engagement in her peers and felt encouraged. The initial tension from the previous day had evolved into a collaborative effort focused on improvement and learning. As the afternoon progressed, testing began. The young woman oversaw the process carefully, ensuring that each step was documented and analyzed. She worked closely with engineers and designers, providing insights and asking probing questions to ensure nothing was overlooked. Her attention to detail and thorough approach helped uncover additional minor issues that could have become problems later. She remained calm and patient, offering guidance without frustration, reinforcing the importance of methodical work. By the end of the day, the team had made significant progress. Adjustments had been implemented and initial tests showed promising results. The young woman felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, not because she sought recognition, but because she knew that the product was safer and more reliable. She had faced a challenging situation, spoken up when it mattered, and helped guide a team through complex problem-solving with focus and integrity. As the office quieted in the evening, the CEO walked past her desk again. This time he paused and offered a genuine smile. It was a small gesture, but it carried recognition and respect. The young woman returned the smile briefly before turning back to her work. She did not need praise. The progress and the lessons learned were enough. She understood that her role was to ensure quality, support collaboration, and uphold integrity, and in doing so she had made a meaningful difference. The day ended with a sense of renewed purpose. The young woman packed her things slowly, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. She knew that challenges would continue, that more obstacles might arise, but she felt confident in the approach they had taken. Speaking up had required courage, but it had led to constructive change. Attention to detail, honesty, and perseverance had proven their value, not just in improving the product, but in fostering a culture of trust and responsibility. As she left the office, she walked with a steady, calm pace, feeling a quiet pride in what had been accomplished. The city lights outside reflected her thoughtful mood, a reminder that even small actions guided by integrity could have a significant impact. She understood that real leadership was not always about power or authority, but about insight, courage, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. The experiences of the day reinforced these lessons, preparing her for whatever challenges might come next, with a clear focus on honesty, diligence, and the greater good. The next day, the office was alive with a quiet urgency. The testing plan had been implemented, and the young woman moved through the workspace with a focused calmness. Employees were performing their tasks with renewed care, conscious of the responsibility each carried. The CEO was present as well, walking through the office with a thoughtful air, occasionally stopping to observe the testing process or to ask clarifying questions. He had changed, subtly but noticeably, his confidence now tempered by consideration and attention to the details of his team's work. The young woman felt a sense of pride, not in herself but in the collective effort of the team. She worked closely with the engineers and designers, checking each test and ensuring that every variable was accounted for. She asked questions that made the team think critically about potential weaknesses, encouraging them to consider scenarios that might otherwise be overlooked. Her approach was calm and steady, not commanding but guiding, allowing others to contribute while ensuring that the focus remained on accuracy and integrity. During one of the testing sessions, a flaw that she had predicted began to appear. A component showed signs of stress under certain conditions, exactly as she had explained. Some of the engineers exchanged worried glances, realizing that their initial assumptions had been too optimistic. The young woman calmly explained what was happening and suggested adjustments to prevent failure. She demonstrated how to strengthen the mechanism and adjust the design to maintain reliability. Her observations were clear, practical, and actionable, allowing the team to respond effectively without panic. The CEO, observing the process, spoke to a senior engineer privately, asking for explanations about why the flaw had not been identified sooner. The young woman noticed the conversation and remained focused on the work, understanding that scrutiny and accountability were part of the process. She knew that the CEO was learning as well, seeing firsthand the importance of attention to detail and the value of honest input from every member of the team. His earlier shock had transformed into engagement, and now he was participating in a more thoughtful and measured way. As testing continued, the young woman guided the team through additional scenarios, identifying subtle points where the product could fail. She encouraged experimentation, asking questions and prompting critical thinking. Each small adjustment brought the product closer to perfection. Employees who had been hesitant to speak up before now offered their own observations, contributing to the collective effort. The young woman facilitated this collaboration, ensuring that every insight was considered and applied where appropriate. Midday arrived, and the CEO called a meeting to review the progress. The team gathered, each person bringing their notes, test results, and suggestions. The young woman presented a summary of the findings, explaining the adjustments made and their impact on the product's reliability. She highlighted the importance of each step, emphasizing how attention to detail could prevent future problems. Her calm, concise delivery helped the team focus on solutions rather than blame. The CEO listened intently, occasionally asking questions that reflected his growing understanding of the technical aspects. He acknowledged the young woman's contributions, praising her ability to analyze the situation thoroughly and guide the team effectively. It was a subtle but meaningful recognition, demonstrating that he valued insight and honesty even when it challenged his initial assumptions. The team responded positively, motivated by the progress and the constructive feedback. After the meeting, the young woman returned to the testing area. She noticed the improved engagement among the employees, who now approached their work with a sense of responsibility and collaboration. She continued to monitor the process, checking for any remaining weaknesses and suggesting practical solutions. Each success reinforced the importance of careful observation and thoughtful action, and she felt satisfaction in knowing that the product was becoming safer and more reliable with every adjustment. In the afternoon, a final set of tests was conducted. The young woman and the engineers observed closely, noting the performance under a range of conditions. The product passed with flying colors, demonstrating the effectiveness of the adjustments and the thoroughness of the testing process. The young woman made notes of the outcomes, ensuring that the improvements were documented and that the team could replicate the process if needed in the future. The CEO watched with a thoughtful expression, clearly impressed by the transformation in the product and the teamwork that had made it possible. As the day came to a close, the team gathered briefly to review the results. There was a quiet celebration, a shared acknowledgement of the effort and attention that had led to success. The young woman remained humble, recognizing that the achievements were the result of collective effort and collaboration. She provided guidance on maintaining these standards in the future, emphasizing the importance of vigilance, honesty, and continuous improvement. The CEO addressed the team, his tone different from the confident, commanding voice he had used in the past. He praised their hard work, attention to detail, and commitment to quality. He highlighted the young woman's contributions, not as a means of singling her out, but to demonstrate the value of critical thinking and integrity. His acknowledgement carried respect and sincerity, showing that he had learned from the experience as well. Employees listened attentively, inspired by the recognition and the reinforcement of principles that prioritized quality and safety. Later, the young woman reflected on the events of the day. She understood that her initial decision to speak up had set in motion a series of changes that benefited the product, the team, and the company culture. She had faced the challenge with honesty and calm determination, and the outcome demonstrated the power of integrity and courage. Her observations had not only prevented potential problems, but had also fostered an environment where employees felt empowered to contribute ideas and address concerns openly. The office quieted as the evening approached. The young woman took a moment to review her notes, ensuring that all observations, adjustments, and test results were accurately recorded. She communicated with team members to confirm next steps and ensure that the improvements would be maintained. Her focus remained on practical action and long-term quality, understanding that the success of the product depended on diligence and collaboration. The CEO walked past her desk again, this time pausing to offer a brief word of appreciation. He acknowledged her patience, insight, and ability to guide the team effectively. The young woman smiled politely, recognizing the gesture but keeping her attention on the work. She understood that the true reward lay in the results, the strengthened product, and the positive changes in the team's approach. As she left the office that evening, she felt a sense of accomplishment. The day had been intense, filled with challenges and opportunities to act with integrity and leadership. She had navigated a complex situation, helped guide a team through problem-solving, and contributed to creating a safer, more reliable product. The experience reinforced her belief in the importance of honesty, collaboration, and attention to detail, lessons that would stay with her throughout her career. Walking through the quiet streets outside, she reflected on the journey so far. Speaking up had required courage, patience, and careful thought. It had changed the dynamics in the office, improved the product, and earned the respect of her peers and leadership. She understood that influence did not always come from authority or position, but from insight, integrity, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. The lessons of the day were clear and enduring, a testament to the power of thoughtful action and principled decision-making. The following morning, the office was alive with a sense of accomplishment and determination. The previous day's testing and adjustments had created a new rhythm in the workplace, one filled with focus, collaboration, and careful attention to detail. The young woman arrived early, as always, and began reviewing the final results from the extensive testing process. Every report, every note, and every adjustment had been meticulously recorded. She knew that today would be about final verification and ensuring that the product was ready for launch without any lingering concerns. The team gathered in the main workspace, energized but focused. There was a sense of quiet pride, a recognition that their efforts over the past few days had made a meaningful difference. The CEO joined them, his demeanor calm yet attentive. He had spent the previous days observing, learning, and participating in the process with a level of humility that had not been present before. Today he was ready to see the results, to understand fully the impact of the adjustments, and to acknowledge the contributions of the team that had made them possible. The young woman presented the final testing results, explaining how each potential flaw had been addressed and the measures implemented to prevent future problems. She highlighted the improvements in reliability, safety, and usability, ensuring that the team understood the reasoning behind every change. Her delivery was clear, concise, and focused, emphasizing the practical outcomes rather than personal achievement. She wanted the team to see the value of diligence, integrity, and collaboration in creating a product they could all be proud of. The CEO listened intently, occasionally asking questions to clarify details or understand the reasoning behind specific adjustments. He acknowledged the young woman's observations and guidance, demonstrating respect for her insight and leadership. The team, too, recognized her role in shaping the process, though she remained humble, focused on ensuring that the product met the highest standards. The room felt united in purpose, each person aware of the shared responsibility that had guided their efforts. As the final verification tests began, the young woman worked closely with the engineers, observing each scenario and documenting the outcomes. The product performed flawlessly under all tested conditions. Any potential weaknesses had been addressed, and the design adjustments had created a reliable, user-friendly device. The team moved through each test with precision and care, guided by the systematic approach that had been developed over the past days. The young woman's focus on detail ensured that nothing was overlooked, and her calm presence helped maintain confidence and clarity among the team. The CEO watched the process with a mixture of pride and reflection. He understood the importance of listening to diverse perspectives and recognized that the young woman's courage in speaking up had not only prevented potential problems but had also strengthened the company's culture. He saw how the team had evolved, how collaboration, honesty, and careful attention to detail had transformed the work environment. The product's readiness was a testament to their collective effort, and he acknowledged the significance of her contributions in shaping that success. Once the final tests were completed, the team gathered for a debrief. The young woman summarized the results, explaining how each potential issue had been mitigated and how the improvements enhanced the product's overall performance. She emphasized the importance of continuous vigilance and the need to maintain high standards in all future projects. The team listened attentively, understanding that these principles were essential not only for the current product, but for their work going forward. The CEO addressed the team, expressing his gratitude and admiration for their dedication and collaboration. He highlighted the young woman's role in identifying the flaw and guiding the team through the process, acknowledging her insight, patience, and leadership. His recognition was sincere and thoughtful, reinforcing the importance of honesty, courage, and critical thinking. The employees felt inspired, motivated by the acknowledgement and the clear example of integrity in action. The young woman felt a quiet satisfaction. She had faced a difficult situation, spoken up when it mattered most, and contributed to a successful outcome. Yet she remained humble, recognizing that the accomplishment was the result of collective effort. Her focus was on the integrity of the work and the impact it would have on the users who relied on the product. She understood that true success was measured not by personal recognition, but by the positive difference made through diligence, honesty, and collaboration. As the office activity settled into a productive rhythm, she continued to oversee the documentation and final adjustments. She communicated with team members to ensure that all improvements were fully implemented and that lessons learned would be applied in the future. Her calm, methodical approach inspired confidence, reinforcing the value of careful observation and